Hi, this is Uncle Matt's D&D Studio. I'm Matt Finch, and the topic for this video is called OSR October Spring. Before I get to it, please, if you're interested in videos like this, go ahead and hit the subscribe channel on the page so that you'll get notifications of upcoming videos and so on and so forth. And what I want to talk about, this October Spring thing is an idea that I started thinking to myself about, hey, let's get people together and do something to help reduce tensions in the OSR community. There have been a bunch of wars in the Google Plus community recently, and I realized sort of after the fact, after I'd made all my notes, that this wasn't really something that I wanted to push as a hey, let's do this kind of a thing, and I sort of mentally retreated back to the whole this is something that I'm going to do on my own without trying to necessarily draft anybody in. Since I've got the notes, though, I'm going to go ahead and talk about how this would work, if other people did join in, which was the original idea that I had when I was writing it up. So I'll sort of run through this. Yesterday, or actually I guess it was the day before yesterday, I did a video about the tensions in the OSR community on G+, and G+ is one of the real creativity engines for the OSR, especially in the DIY community. And we had a couple of wars where people walked away from it and so on and so forth. And in that video, I was talking about how there's a structural difficulty with lowering tensions simply because there are two communities that want to use that hobby space in two different ways. One of them is a freewheeling discuss anything area, and one of them is an area where it's kind of a hobby space preserve for people to get away from that when they're doing it elsewhere. And the idea was this. It came from two different concepts. One of them was Matt Jackson pointing out, hey, let's produce a lot of content as a response to the personal things that were going on. Just kind of drown it out by going back to the approach that a lot of people had taken at the beginning, which was this is just a place for sharing content and gaming resources and ideas and so on and so forth. I've now said so on and so forth several times, and I'm really going to try and not do that anymore in this video. The other thing, other than the idea of producing the content, was that a couple of the people who were involved in all of the difficulties are now talking to each other by private message and resolving the issues that they've got with each other, and they've asked for people to sort of just cool down for a couple of days, let that process work its way through. And the combination of the ideas of content plus a cool down made me think to myself, what is it that an individual person can do in order to help create kind of a reboot in the community's attitude about things, and just basically get everyone to step back from the brinks a little bit, go back toward the methods that people had been using before. And so this was my list of things that if I were going to suggest it, I'll list the whole list and then talk about what specifically I'm going to do out of that. And if there does happen to be anybody who wants to join in on this, feel free to let's do it down in the comments section, and that's a place for people to talk. I don't really have a great until we get the Old School Radio Old School Radio website up and running. I don't have a real good place to put together comments other than here in the YouTube channel. So, getting on to the actual meat of what I'm talking about, I had two things that I was thinking about. One of them has to do with behavior, and one of them has to do with content. And so, first talking about what I thought the behavior ideas were in terms of what somebody ought to do. And those were to, first of all, reward content with comments. It's a real common thing that someone will post up a well-thought-out D&D resource, and the only answer is one or two posts saying, hey, good job. And but if you post a thing about scrambled eggs, and this has happened to me, you will get 100 comments on it. And so, people who create the content don't really get the recognition for it just because of the pattern of the way that people communicate on G+ and elsewhere. And so point number one is reward content with comments. And I had a couple of other things. Another one similar to that was link to comments, and that's it's not exactly the flip side, but it's an amplification of the idea of giving people comments to their content. Is also link to it. If you have some other place where you've got something really cool that you've seen, make a link to that in a place that you're talking. Just let people sort of know that it's out there. A lot of this stuff works as a network and a web. The third thing is something that I talked about on the last video. I'm not going to jump in. If I see somebody who's engaged in some sort of war, I'm going to send a private message to them rather than jumping in on my own hook and trying to support somebody, given that that might be supporting them in a way that they don't want to be supported. And one more thing about comments on content is I'm going to avoid the sort of, hey, let me give you some negative feedback on that. And rather, anything that I do is going to be very specifically a matter of constructive criticism, either if I do it at all. So that's a matter of saying, hey, I might suggest, as opposed to you ought to, or this fails as a result of. Here's what I would suggest, and then something that is a definite, tangible suggestion on it. And so those are the things about behavior. And then the second thing that I'm going to work on is producing some content. And I'm going to do that for my little October Spring in a very particular way. A lot of times people feel like the content that they've got to come up with has to be perfect, and often the perfect is the enemy of the good in terms of posting content. And so what I'm going to do during this month is produce the kind of stuff that I think is easy to do, something that really doesn't involve a great deal of work or effort on my part. It's just the stuff that's coming out of what it is that I'm thinking and doing. And so from my part, that's probably going to be some videos like this. It might be a couple of notes or something like that, but mostly what I'm focused on right now is the fact that we just finished the Old School Gamer Radio Kickstarter, and I'm going to work on that, but I'm going to post little things about it, let people know how that's going on, and just basically that's going to be the sort of stuff that I come up with, because it's what I'm already doing, and I'm just sharing what I'm already doing. And I think that's one of the directions that would be really good for a kind of a reboot, because it means there would be a lot of content, and it would be personal content, not something that's necessarily scripted or sculpted or highly developed or that has high production values. It's just, this is what I'm doing. And that's what a lot of people really, really like to see, because when you're talking about DIY, finished resources are awesome, but also one of the things people want to tap into is thought processes and ideas while something is not necessarily finished off and polished. So just what kind of stuff I'm working on, mid-thought, this kind of content going out to people so that they can take a look at it, think about it, comment on it, use it, whatever they want to do. And then when I made my overall list about when I was thinking, hey, what if this were a project for people to do, I did some brainstorming, and so here's the list of things that I was thinking of in terms of interesting content that people can put up without too much effort. And so the first category that I thought of was pictures. A lot of people do pictures. What are the kinds of pictures that people like to see? What are the kind of pictures that are easy to do? And so I thought about, here are the types of pictures that I thought about that a person could post pretty easily. A picture of people gaming, your gaming group. Take a snapshot. People like to see stuff like that. A terrain picture, if you've been working on a piece of terrain, people like to see stuff like that. A piece of art that you made. Obviously, this isn't necessarily the whole group of us, but frankly, even a really crappy piece of art is often fascinating for somebody who's thinking about ideas. It doesn't need to be up at the high professional grade of artwork. If you made a sketch of something, throw it up there. People like to see something like that. Another one would be, and this was a sort of a funny one, but I was thinking, take a selfie with your favorite D&D thing. And I was thinking about, my favorite D&D thing. It might be that picture of the skull with the horns behind me, or it might possibly be the plush bullet that I got from GameholeCon. GameholeCon does a stuffed animal every year, and so I've got a plushy bullet somewhere that's not anywhere near the camera for me to grab and show. But Another thing would be, there are some people who do really cool character sheets. If you've got a character sheet, even if it's one that's filled in, a lot of people like to sort of look behind the scenes on a character sheet and see what was done in making that character. So that was pictures, and then I also thought about community content, which is once again not game content, but here this would be something like mention some of your favorite posters. Doesn't have to be your top 10. In fact, it's probably not a great idea to ever try and list people in a hierarchy because you're going to forget somebody. But listing here are some interesting people out there is a cool sort of a post, and also a positive review on something that you liked, even if it's going all the way back in time to the Hall of the Fire Giant King or something like that. Most of the time that people have some kind of good reaction to something, it's for a reason, and that makes even short reviews of the very oldest material still something that people are interested in taking a look at, and it's not too difficult to just spin out, these are my thoughts about this module. Hey, here's a couple things that happened to us in this module, sort of the way that G1 Hall of the G1 Steading of the Hill Giant Chief. There's the huge division between the people who went in through the warg kennels and the people who went in through the front and ended up in the massive battle in the banquet hall. Another thing on that would be collaborating on an itty-bitty task, like grabbing somebody who does medium grade or even crappy grade art and writing up a monster for it, and just the two of you sort of throw the thing up there as being, hey, here's the thing we made. Take a look. And that's, once again, a lot of people talk about the punk aesthetic that's involved in the OSR. Just, putting it up, it's not necessarily polished, but, this is the sort of thing people like to take a look at. And so that sort of mini collaboration is a cool idea, especially since Inktober is going on, and a lot of the artists that are out there are thinking about stuff. You'd have to integrate the Inktober thing comes with prompts that they're working with, but you could have an author slide right in there and say, okay, well, here's the prompt, why don't we do this? So those were the community type things that I thought about. And then another thing similar to that is story content, and I only picked up a couple things in that, but that's just, people love to hear, when did you start gaming? How did you start gaming? Who'd you start gaming with? Oh, it was my older brother, or it was, a teacher in an after-school thing, or whatever it was, when you started gaming. And another one is, best encounters. When were the times that something absolutely amazing happened there? And for that kind of thing, anybody who ever wants to look up the court case involving a woman whose name was Palsgraf, Palsgraf. That's a fascinating case to read, in which a subway encounter went bad. Finally, there's game content, and game content obviously specifically doesn't have to be any kind of full-fledged adventure. Like I was saying, what I'm thinking about here is throwing out partial things and drafts and half-formed thoughts for people to play off of in my little October Spring concept that I had. And so, the list of content is a lot easier to make. I mean, that's just, here's a map, here's a new monster, here's a trap, here's a puzzle, a spell, a magic item, any of the things in those kind of categories. And also there also a tip for a dungeon master, just one tip, here's the thing. A tip for players, here's the thing. Something like that. Anything, once again, even if it's partially completed, the idea being, let's put out a whole bunch of content that is linked to the other people who are doing content. It's a model that's been done several times before. In this case, it's just sort of grabbing a month, and for me it's only going to be a half a month because I have to go on a trip to Europe in the second half of October. But so anyway, this is the sort of thing that I'm going to do. I'm going to be putting out videos and probably just some links to people that are out there doing interesting stuff, and that's going to be my little contribution to the whole system of trying to do a slight reboot on the tension that's been out there. So with that, I am at about 14 minutes on the video, which is usually longer than I like to do, so I'm just going to go ahead and cut it off right here and say, whatever type of D&D you play, imagine the hell out of it.